Hook. 3 sentences that pull you in. I was in the nicest cabin on the plane wearing a hoodie so worn it had a hole at the cuff, and a woman in a silk scarf decided I did not belong. She told me to move to the back in front of everyone. And she wasn't a stranger. She was the kind of person who believed her uniform made her truth. What followed was a mess of pride power and a mistake so big it changed 2 lives. Act 1. The scene. The people. The small thing that sparks a wildfire. Morning light made the jet bridge shine like a movie set at Harborcrest International suited travelers moving with purpose airport coffee, steaming the whole perfect postcard of travel. Up front was the premium cabin. Cream, leather-polished wood, the kind of place you whisper in because everything feels expensive and hush. In charge of that hush was Maris Hale. Hair in that impossible roll, smiles practiced down to the spacing of her teeth eyes that did not laugh unless she allowed them to. She'd been doing this job for decades, learned how to read a boarding manifest the way other people read scripture. To Maris, order, mattered faces fit in boxes, and she liked living in the boxes she knew. Then there was me. Jada, Rivers 21 hoodie with a frayed thumb, jeans with a story in every hole, headphones like an island so I could breathe. I'd been up for 3 days straight. Funeral arrangements, court paperwork for my aunt, the kind of grief that made your knees soft, and I bought the seat last minute because it was the only way to make a connecting flight, not because I fit any picture Maris kept in her head. I stepped through the curtain, tapped my ticket to my phone, and looked for seat 1C. Maris saw me, and she saw something else. Not the boarding pass, not the weariness, but a mismatch, a puzzle she didn't like. "Economy is that way," she said, voice smooth and thin, pointing like she wanted me boxed into a place I'd never been welcomed. I blinked, showed my pass, 1C Coastal Air Flight 412, and smiled the sorry smile you use when you're tired of arguing. That smile made her angrier. That's when she decided I needed a lesson. Act 2. Escalation. The turning point. The revelation. She didn't ask to scan my ticket. She snatched my phone like a judge ripping up a paper. "This is fake," she declared, loud enough for the couple with the expensive watch to look up for the man in the pressed suit, to stop breathing for the cabin to rearrange itself around her show. I did what most people do when someone's trying to shame them in public. I tried to be small, to be reasonable. "Please, it's real," I said, hands steady because grief had taught me patience, not because I wasn't shaking inside. Maris performed a drama of authority. She called for the captain, she spoke of security. She made declarations like someone reading from a manual of rightness. The captain, an unremarkable man named Hank Lyle, came forward because the crew calls him when things look like they'll need a pen and a signature. He bent in the aisle like someone lowering himself into a courtroom. Then he looked at me and froze. The kind of freeze that happens when you recognize a face you didn't expect. "Jada," he said, because he'd seen me at the hospice chapel when he was there with a friend, because the world is small in the worst ways. "Oh, you're here." That moment changed the room. The performance crumpled. Maris's smile tilted into something it wasn't built for. Uncertainty. But she doubled down anyway. Having been exposed wasn't enough. She wanted proof she was right, so she went farther than her brief allowed. When I nodded off in the seat exhausted, she searched my bag. Not a cursory check, but a full-on rifling that would have made any privacy textbook wince. She found my aunt's medicine, pills in bottles with a name that wasn't mine, and a sealed envelope with a refund from the funeral home. To her, it was simple arithmetic: young woman in a hoodie plus pills plus cash equals guilt. To me, it was the messy human truth. I had packed my dead aunt's things in a fog. I had the refund because the funeral changed plans, and I had a heart aching so big I couldn't keep it in my chest. Maris called Heathrow security from the crew rest line, painting a picture of a drug mule and a compromised captain. I sat there in disbelief, watching a stranger invent a story out of my grief. People took videos. Somebody whispered, "training moment," like it was a show. My father, because these things always have a leak of fate, happened to be at the gate, and as the police came up the steps, he walked straight past the ring and into the cabin like he owned the place. He didn't shout, he came quiet and sure, and he was the voice that cut through Maris's performance. "That's my daughter," Act 3. Collapse. Consequences, the messy aftermath. When the bag was opened in front of the cabin, the theater fell away. The pills were prescribed to my aunt. The envelope held a funeral home receipt, the facts stacked like bricks. Heavy, undeniable. Detective Ann Kearns, who had the tone of someone used to sorting truth from rumor, read the labels, read the receipt, and looked at Maris like you'd look at a person who'd tripped on their own ego. The hum of the plane, the distant hiss of rain on the tarmac, everything narrowed to the metallic click when she said the words no one thought they'd hear in a first-class cabin. "Ms. Hale, you're under arrest for filing a false report." That sound, cuffs closing, was the kind of ordinary justice that goes viral in the new age. Phone cameras recorded Maris's face as it shifted from confident to undone as she tried to explain that she was just protecting passengers, and that the rules mattered more than a human being's dignity. Passengers who had nodded along when she scolded me now watched her leave in silence. The man who had told me earlier not to fight the crew looked down at his hands and shook his head. Jessica, a junior attendant Maris had berated an hour before for an untucked blouse, stood like a new kind of witness. She stared at Maris and said nothing, which was loud. After the handcuffs, the plane emptied in a different way. My father and I went to the gate. The staff apologized, the captain tried to smooth things over, and the airline did what big companies do when a moment becomes a headline. They put out a statement, they promised an investigation, they pretended the human cost was manageable. Maris was fired the next day, which is a tidy ending until you remember the rest of it. The lawsuits, the legal notices, the way someone's life can be shredded in a week. She lost her job, her pension was at risk, and every place she applied saw the video and the headline. Her 20 years in the sky evaporated like a bad dream. But there was a flip side. I couldn't unfeel the way people looked at me when the cameras stopped rolling. Some were ashamed, some were louder in their support, others still wondered what they'd have done. 2 months later, a fundraiser started in my name, not because I wanted it, but because strangers decided they'd rather help than watch. I used what came in not to buy anything fancy, but to start a small scholarship for students from my neighborhood who needed help getting to interviews and auditions. Travel costs that make or break possibilities. I studied. Switched my major to public interest law because if one thing that night did, it made me see how systems are stacked and how small acts of courage can nudge them. The last scene is not a miracle. Maris didn't become a villain in a comic. She became a cautionary tale and a person with bills. I didn't become a hero with a cape. I became someone who turned an ordeal into an obligation to others. What I can't give you a neat answer on is whether the world got kinder. People applauded, then liked, then moved on as the internet does. But some things changed. The airline updated training the captain spoke about seeing passengers as humans. And Jessica, the untucked blouse girl, got a scholarship to flight school from money people sent because they were tired of watching uniforms be used as permission to judge. Final. The open ending, the challenge, the call to action. So, where do you stand? Was the punishment for Maris deserved? Was the humiliation she felt a rightful correction or a public crucifixion? Are we better served by accountability or by mercy that teaches not ruins? I don't pretend to know the perfect answer, but I will tell you this. When a person decides someone else doesn't deserve dignity because of how they look, it's rarely a one-off. It's training. It's culture. It's policy. You want to fix the problem. Start with how people are taught to see one another. Tell me what you think. Have you ever been written off because of your clothes, your accent, or the neighborhood your parents came from? Have you ever watched someone be corrected in public and felt it was wrong but didn't speak up? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this hit you like the video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it, maybe a friend who thinks order is more important than people, maybe a manager who hires, maybe a friend who travels a lot. Subscribe if you want more real stories told straight, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Argue in the comments. Defend her defend. Maris defend nuance, but say something because silence is part of the problem.